and also when he's in a jail cell, he won't be able to even talk to his campaign team.
I mean, this is uncharted territory. Nobody thought that they would push the nation to the brink of a constitutional crisis, which is what we're in now, people. You might not want to admit it, but literally the Republic and the Constitution is at play here. So nothing's off the table. I've been clear for years. The reason why a lot of people are going to these lengths is because they're treasonous, corrupt criminals who, if accountability does occur, they will face repercussions, loss of prestige, loss of money, loss of wealth, maybe loss of freedom, and maybe even further if their treasonous acts are revealed. So listen, what would you do to protect your family, your wealth, and everything else from the crimes you've committed? I don't know. That's been my read since day one, and I'm sticking to it.
I would say
Chief Trump, go ahead, go, because what's his face dropped.
No, I would say, so I saw someone mentioned before about Republicans. I think it was you, Lisa, talking about that. They've been asleep at the wheel for a very long time, unfortunately, and this is a consequence of that. And I'd also say, in terms of what's going on right now, we honestly never thought that Trump would be in a situation where, in a trial which should have been not guilty, in my opinion, he was ruled to be guilty on all counts, and now he's facing jail time if it goes to that. It's very plausible, and I'm sure that's the end goal, to put him in jail. I don't know if Nick thought that Trump would be ending up in jail on this trial specifically, or maybe even the future trials.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if they'll put him in jail. I think, as Tira said earlier, I think she made a good point that it would set up a genuine constitutional crisis. It'd be a constitutional issue if he wins the election and he's in jail. But we've really been in a constitutional crisis, and it's not rhetoric. That is precisely what we're in. I mean, specifically since the election in 2020. The election of 2020 revealed how vague and ambiguous the Constitution is about the transfer of power from one president to the next. The actual procedure, the actual process, there's no specificity. And actually, the ambiguity specifically regarding the January 6th date is what set up the January 6th crisis, because there was this legal theory, which, admittedly, I think is dubious, that if Mike Pence didn't read the votes from particular states, technically, Biden could not clinch the majority of the votes, and then it would go to Congress. I mean, that was the John Eastman strategy, or the legal theory behind the January 6th crisis. So, I mean, we've really been in this for a long time. And I agree. I think it's driving the nation to the brink. And the big question is, what happens on what happens on November 6th, 2024? Or, well, I should say, it's not like it used to be. What happens whenever they finish counting the votes? I'm insinuating what happens when we know who the victor is after the election. It could take weeks before they count the votes. But what happens when there's a decision made, whether it's Biden or Trump? I think there is a genuine concern about civil disorder. If it's going to be Trump, that Antifa will be out there in full force, in exponentially greater intensity than they did in 2016, because there was an admittedly small Antifa force, I think, right after the election during the inauguration, nothing really to speak of. And then, of course, in 2020, you had Stop the Steal and January 6th. So there's really this unstoppable force, immovable object, Trump being the unstoppable force, deep state being the immovable object. What happens the day or the week? What happens after this collision? Because I don't think either side is going to accept defeat. What is, I think, a little bit, what is telling is that I think that if anybody were to make a guess as to which side would capitulate, it would be the Republicans. Like, if we're really being honest with ourselves, let's say there's a scenario where Trump wins. The Democrats will rage. The left, the deep state.
Well, Podesta war game, Nick, right? Didn't Podesta, this was war game by the Biden campaign via Podesta, where they said they wouldn't accept it, and they expected California and another states to basically, push the issue. So,
except liberals didn't accept it in 2016, and Republicans had an insurrection. So I don't even know what you're talking about.
Listen, this voice is crazy. That voice of the enemy is crazy. Let me just finish my point. Because I'm actually making a point. I'm saying that I think that the right, what's really sad about the right is I think that they are just going to take this. I mean, like, perfect example today, they deliver this verdict in this case. It's a total sham trial. And you have all these Republicans going out just like they did when he got charged last year. And they're saying, war, it's war. I remember last year when Trump got charged, or maybe it was after Mar-a-Lago in 23. Or 22 rather. I remember Steve Crowder started selling a t-shirt that said war, and he went on Twitter and said war. And you know what he did the next day? Nothing. He did his show again. And it's like nothing happened for the whole interceding year between then and now. And just like then, today.
They stormed the Capitol, bro. They stormed the Capitol. People died. People were.
I was there.
Brian, please wait. Dear God, I hate this guy. Okay.
No, wait. I want to. Well, let me just. I'll finish very quickly, and then I want to hear Brian. It's actually good to have a back and forth, better than like a circle jerk. Perfect foil too, based on the voice. I know this is going to be good content, but Republicans never do anything, and they make the same mistakes. They lay down, and this is the last thing I'll say. The perfect example is Trump got in, and despite saying he would arrest Hillary Clinton, he didn't. It was inexplicable. He got in, he talked all that, he talked a big game, oh, we're going to throw you in jail, I'm going to appoint a special prosecutor. He got in, he didn't. Biden got in, arrested everybody, they went after Trump, they banned him from social media. I mean, the vaccine mandate, they went all in. The lesson is Republicans got to stop getting pushed around, because at the end of the day, it's a question of will. But that's the last thing I'll say. I kind of, I don't control space, but I want to hear from Brian. I want to hear back and forth here.
Go ahead, Brian.
Since 1797, we've had peaceful transfers of power between parties since 1801 until Trump. The idea that the Republicans are going to be the meek and mild and we haven't had history. You have to go back to Reconstruction when the Democrats were the violent insurrectionists. That was in the 1860s when they were the white supremacists. Now it's switched. All right.
Wait a minute, Brian.
Fact of the matter is, the simple fact of the matter is, this is not. I'm going to be very quick. The simple fact of the matter is, this is not a sham trial. It's a very basic thing. And no one serious human being believes Donald Trump only a few weeks before the election paid off a porn star he had an affair with just before an election. That was when the affair was 10 years ago. Right?
That's not illegal, dude.
So it was obviously the political element to it. That's all they had to convince the jurors of, because if there's a political element, then it's a felony, and it's 34 counts of misrepresenting what should have been declared as a political expense. That's the simple truth. He broke the law. He paid the price. Justice has been served. I land my plane.
So you want Clinton and
wait a
Podesta in jail because all they paid was an $8,000 fine. It's peaceful transfer of power, ignoring parties, which even the right betrayed them. Well, not the right, the neocons and the GOP mainstream. Like, what are you talking about peaceful transfer of power? You literally had the alphabet boys concoct a fake Russiagate hoax that was not revealed in the IG.
When did Democrats storm the Capitol?
Let me finish. I'll be very quick. That was not revealed in the Mueller report. That was only revealed later that John Brennan had a handwritten note saying that the DNC and Hillary Clinton concocted the whole thing. So don't come up here and act holier than thou. You're full of shit.
It's not only that. Let me say
Democrats didn't storm the Capitol and assault
I
met Mike Fanone. I met Harry Dunn. I met Aquilino Gonell. I met Hodges. Those four guys put their lives on the line to protect democracy. Democrats didn't do that during a.
You met the Hobbs twins?
Republicans did.
Brian, I was at the inauguration. I don't know how many people here were, okay? Peaceful transfer of power. They had to lock down the whole city, okay? I couldn't with my mother.
Because of the insurrection.
I'm not done. I couldn't with my mother get into the thing because we couldn't get into where we had to go sit at our seats to see him get sworn in. Trump, this was in 2016, 17, right? I absolutely couldn't get in there because we had riot police blocking it. We had protesters throwing all kinds of grenades and like smoke bombs and shit. Don't sit there and act like there was a peaceful transfer of power when they were lighting limos on fire.
There wasn't. It's because of the insurrection. There was no.
We're talking 2016, genius. 2016, genius.
Yeah, we're talking about 2016. Go
ahead. Let me jump in here. Let me jump in here. Hey, very, very important point. What about BLM? What about when you and the boys were burning down Minneapolis?
That was in the summer of 2020, and it wasn't about the election. It wasn't about
burning down the city, raping everybody, and burning everything down, and
false equivalents. One has nothing to do with elections.
More like burn, murder.
You guys were going and they were arrested. They were
raping everybody.
Okay, guys.
Way more arrests of the Black Lives Matter protesters. Thousands.
Why is it not muted? Listen, 1 second, Brian. Brian, I want to hear what you got to say. I think everyone does. Just let everyone else scream. There's two people screaming at the same time. Let Nick finish his point, and then I'll go to you, Brian. Nick, go ahead, and then I'll go to Brian.
Thank you. Yeah, well, just to wrap up my point, I mean, the subject is about the political violence, and I think it's very clear the left, for better or for worse, they are better at the organizing, and it goes both ways. I mean, there's peaceful, but there's also violent. You got the Women's March, but you also have Antifa and BLM. And I think it's no question as to who is mobilized and who is out there. who's really activated, it's the left. I mean, and the right, I think, was an exception. And to your point, actually, on January 6th, and I can speak to this because I was there and I was at Stop the Steal, the entire Stop the Steal campaign was totally disorganized. The Trump lawyers basically gave up on his election challenge the night that Biden became the victor, or whenever, they certified the last election results. There were very few people inside the White House that were even working on this. It was guys like Garrett Ziegler working under the trade office with Peter Navarro that was doing this stuff. Well, and point being, well, whatever. But point being is it was totally disorganized. It was totally like ad hoc, ramshackle stuff. And it was basically like an utter failure. I mean, across the board, Turning Point wasn't out there. GOP wasn't out there. Trump campaign was barely out there. And at the end of the day, at January 6th, I mean, one, that whole thing was the exception to the rule. Besides that, January 6th was mostly peaceful. I mean, that's the grand irony. They talk about mostly peaceful protesters. There were like a handful of people that engaged in violence. The vast majority of people,
of which there were 500,000.
Yeah, I was there. It was a handful of people. It was like 50 that did
only 50 people went inside the Capitol. Only 50 people went through the Capitol.
Okay.
No, I'm not talking about entering. I'm talking about doing physical damage, number one. And number two is the reason why
to enter. The entering was itself an act of violence. That was not some peaceful thing.
No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. Okay, so you tell me. So I was a Hill staffer for however many years. So when you say that all these other people, when you say that all these other protesters that have come in and sat in people's offices and all that never got arrested, that were topless, running around with cannon,
I was going to speak after.
Right? And you're telling me that they were what? They weren't arrested. They weren't anything.
Well, I'll wrap up my point, but basically there were 500,000 people there on January 6th out of the 1,600 that were charged. All right. Can I finish? I mean, this is like low impulse control.
Brian, you have to let him finish and then you get the point. This is what I want to keep on stage, but it always becomes really hard.
You got to put the soy down. You're getting too hopped up on fucking Soylent meal drinks. But look, I mean, there were 500,000 people there. 1,600 were charged. Out of the 1,600 that were charged, it's like a few dozen that were doing anything violent. And the point is, that was the big exception. We all know that between Antifa, BLM, Women's March, the left, violent and nonviolent, they are massively organized. They're in terms of mass mobilization, they are activated. They are the ones, I believe, in 2024 that are the real threat for civil disorder. I know that's counterintuitive to like a resistance liberal, but if you have a time frame beyond 2021, you know that's the case. And I think that's why the regime is going to favor, in addition to other reasons, Biden.
All right. So
the reason why Republicans are scared to mobilize too is...
Sulaiman?
Yeah, go ahead.
So here's the thing. Bush was legitimately elected. The Electoral College legitimately weighed in. But that election was stolen by the Supreme Court. There was no... People threw a few freaking tomatoes, okay? We accepted Bush and we accepted the loss of John Kerry. Okay, we accepted 2016. Now, we did say that the Russians interfered, but people are dumb enough to fall for propaganda. That's still a legitimate outcome. So it was still a legitimate election in 2016. There was no violent resistance to Trump in 2016. The Women's March...
Brian, have you heard of the Steele dossier?
The Women's March wasn't violent, all right? So then we go to the Republicans. The Republican Party is now MAGA. It's not the neoconservatives. It's not Adam Kinzinger. It's not Mitch McConnell. It's Trump MAGA. That is the Republican Party now. The fascist Republican Party.
I don't know. I mean, Mitch McConnell's still in control.
And here's the thing. 6 days before January 6th, I'm still going here. 6 days before, Nicholas went much longer. Before January 6th, I interviewed on December 31st, Brad Raffensperger and Gabriel Sterling and Jordan Fuchs, the Deputy Secretary of State for Georgia. They were talking about the violent incitement that was happening in Georgia, how they were afraid of violence, that they were getting sexualized death threats, including to Brad Raffensperger's wife, how their people put a noose outside the contractor.
What does the state election board in Georgia say?
So the point that I'm making to you is people were seeing the violent incitement happening before January 6th. January 6th wasn't one day where things got out of hand. They planned and they actually moved the date of the rally to be the same day of the certification in Congress to bring a violent mob, people that brought weapons. They actually talked about this, Cassie Hutchinson and others. This was during the January 6th committee testimony where Liz Cheney and Ann Kinzinger were there. So it was a bipartisan. If you don't like them, there were metal detectors and there were people refusing to go through the metal detectors to get closer to Trump because they were bringing weapons. I spoke with Officer Aquilino Ganell and Harry Dunn and Mike Fanone and Hodges, the 4 officers who testified at the committee. I've went and interviewed Aquilino Ganell on the grounds of the Capitol where he physically fought these people. They were violent and they were armed. There is no violent armed mob of Democrats that tried to stop the results of an election. There were protests in the summer that got violent with a lot of instigators from Antifa and others. And
You're just ignoring inauguration.
You cannot equate the Black Lives
Okay.
Matter protests from the summer and the violence that happened there with a deliberate attempt to interfere the certification of the electoral college votes of the presidential election. Those were not tied to an election. So Democrats have no record in recent memory of violently trying to overturn an election. Republicans do. To claim that Democrats are going to be more likely to be violent in 2024 is absolutely absurd. We don't have that track record. Republicans do.
Chop and Chaz coming to a
Wait, hold on.
Okay, 1 second, 1 second. Go ahead, Prodigal.
Yeah, I mean, it's a joke.
Rip
I
his
mean,
front to
he lives in fantasy land. This is my issue with how they frame January 6th, and the Supreme Court's going to decide this soon, this month, in regards to the bullshit Enron charge that they used to convict
with
and
two insurrectionists on the court, by the way.
Brian, how many
finish.
federal assets were embedded on January 6th? It still hasn't been disclosed. The number's up to 40 now.
None. You have no proof of any of that.
We know that
Nothing
they had
is
people
proven. There's no
embedded
proof. Zero proof.
in the Proud Boys. The number 2, we know they had people embedded in the Oath Keepers, right?
Roger Stone was there with the Proud Boys.
If you're going to frame this way, really, we need the 14,000 hours plus the footage. We need to know how many federal assets have been embedded. We haven't been given any of this information, so don't come here and act holier than thou. We still don't know who unlocked the magnetic doors. We don't know any of this. And one of the most highly secure and surveilled cities in the world, we don't know who laid the pipe bomb. People see through this bullshit.
DC is not that secure.
They can chase down a grandma who was waved in by Capitol Police walking between velvet robes, right? When you look at what's being done here, what's on corporate media is much different when you dive into what actually occurred. Until you can say how many federal assets were embedded.
So no, to Prodigal.
You don't have a case. I'm not arguing that there weren't violent people.
They were just walking through the velvet ropes. They were attacking the dais.
Everybody, that's what was done. What are you talking about?
They attacked officers. They used flags to smash the windows. They stabbed officers and tasered them. They had weapons and clubs. They had a new.
So how many officers died on January 6th, Brian? How many of them died from the stab wounds?
People died after from other officers. There were hundreds of wounded officers. There were hundreds of wounded officers.
Hundreds of wounded officers.
And there were thousands of wounded officers.
No,
during
he's
the summer of
confusing that with the
love.
attack on the White House. You're confusing the hundreds of wounded officers with the attack on the White House done by
I was there that day, and it did not happen.
Democrats.
There were not hundreds of wounded officers when the protesters came and Trump came out with the Bible.
There were 76.
I spoke with 4 wounded officers. I spoke with 4 of them personally.
Yet none of them died from those injuries. Wow, MAGA really
None of them
sucks.
died doesn't give you a pass. That's a stupid argument. None of them died. You can't assault a police officer and say, well, I didn't kill him, I'm innocent. What a stupid argument.
Wow, no. My thing is, again, if you had that many wounded officers, if the level of violence was that grave, then clearly you would have had some kind of casualty, unless maybe you're overstating what actually happened that day, or MAGA is just really bad at,
wounded is still
attacking.
a casualty. Okay, wounded is a casualty.
No.
Yeah, go
They've
look at
been
the
more
footage.
violent.
When they
Yes,
left
they
the
were still
Capitol,
a
it's like
violent
they were
mob.
leaving a movie theater. What are you talking about? Nobody's saying if somebody committed violent acts, they shouldn't face prosecution. But to paint everybody like that, then I guess everybody who's involved in BLM and everything else is one brush. Right? The reality of the matter, that's not what occurred.
Anyone who was on the grounds of the Capitol and stuck around while they stormed the Capitol. There were people who left and were disgusted. If you stuck around while they were storming the Capitol, you were supporting the insurrection. If you went inside the Capitol, you're guilty of multiple crimes.
What about if the police opened the door for you and gave you an escort, like we saw on several of the videos released? Is that a crime? Does that count as entrapment?
Saying, oh, Hamas took care of us.
Does that count as entrapment?
There was a mob threatening them outside. And those officers failed in their duty.
What about if the police point you out to where to go, they hold the door open for you, and they let you take pictures at the podium?
As I just said, that's them failing in their duties. Not all of them.
God bless those officers for staying so composed and looking so accommodating.
Okay, those 4 guys did their job. And they were injured severely.
This is what they want. They want us talking about this because Biden has nothing to run on. What is he going to run on? That the value of the dollar
your boy got convicted on 34 counts, 34 felonies. So you're the one who's
weaponized the federal government. He's moving the U.S. towards a pandemic treatment now as they push the bird flu. What does Biden have to run on? Nothing. Just Brian's going crazy. Because he's secure. While the rest of the country's going to hell. He doesn't care about you. Brian pretends that he's totally.
I wish Elon Musk would institute a filter to where people with an IQ under 100 can't speak. That would be really great because then we could tune Brian out.
Guys, one at a time. This is actually getting really tough, right? Brian, go finish your point, and then I will go to somebody else to respond. Go ahead, Brian.
As someone who interviewed officers who were there on January 6th, who fought and were injured, okay? That was not a peaceful transfer of power, number one. Number two, all they had to prove was that Trump made this decision partly at least based on politics. And frankly, when you have a 10-year-old affair with a porn star and you pay them off right after the Access Hollywood tape comes out a few days before the election, it's obvious that this should have been money disclosed to the FEC as a campaign contribution. It was not. That's a violation of FEC law.
Why didn't the
Justice Department didn't prosecute him. It's still a violation. Guilty, 34 counts. He's a fucking felon and he deserves it.
Actually, he's not a felon yet.
Right, okay, let me go to... I want to go to Lucky. One second.
He's been convicted. He is a felon. He's convicted.
No,
Okay,
actually, you're wrong. That shows how dumb you are.
He hasn't been
He's
sentenced,
not
but he's been
technically a
convicted.
felon.
He's now a felon.
No, he's not. Nope, not true. Go read any legal argument. He's
real
not a
opium there.
convicted
He's
felon
convicted on
until the
all
judge
34
passes the
counts.
sentence.
He's a
I'll
felon.
send you the article, Brian.
Hey, all right, this guy's a maniac. Can we get Brian to calm down? He's totally
I'm
out
a
of
maniac for
control.
claiming being found guilty on 34 felony
No,
counts.
because
Makes you a felon. What a
you're
maniac
interrupting
is.
everybody. Because you're interrupting everybody and you're annoying. Your voice is annoying. Let's just calm down. We could have a civil conversation. Now, with regard
when Nick Fuentes says your voice is annoying, you need to take that very seriously.
Okay, that's just, I didn't
Nick.
say that about your Jewish
Wait,
accent.
we have this racist, right-wing, awful person here. This is ridiculous.
I don't know. The conversation was going pretty well when Nick was.
Guys, calm down, please. Let me go to Lucky. People stop interrupting, please. Lucky, go ahead.
Thanks.
Go and give a response to... hi, Lucky. Nice to have you. Go and respond to Brian, please.
Yeah, I mean, this guy Brian Frydenberg comes up and he's just running this making this case the whole space chaos, right? He's talking about we're talking about J6. The space is about the ridiculous 34 felony counts against Donald Trump. It comes from an FEC violation, which is normally a slap on the wrist. Obama got hit with a $300,000 fine in 2008 from an FEC violation. So they created this new legal theory where they're like, oh, well, we can do he altered a business record, falsified a business record, and then we can combine it with the FEC violation, even though the FEC didn't find issue with this, and now we can make it a felony. And then we're going to throw 34 counts, at the jury. We're going to give confusing jury instructions of like 130 pages. We're going to put 2 attorneys on the jury, by the way, which, the attorneys up here know that attorneys typically get struck from being on the jury because they're able to kind of control the room. They're able to kind of bend the jury to their will. It's well known that that's why lawyers are typically struck from the jurors because jurors, laymen are going to rely on the experts, right? So they're going to be asked these 130 pages of charges. They're going to go to these lawyers and be like, hey, so what about this? What about this? It's in Manhattan, right? These are very liberal attorneys. I'm going to wager. So it's a farce, right? We know what it is. They wanted to get the salacious testimony from Stormy Daniels on there and talk about the bogus.
And Hope Hicks.
And Hope Hicks, what does that have to do with anything? The point of the matter is, the Democrats
testified as well. She was one of the witnesses.
Brian, someone else talking. Right?
Brian, can I just finish? So the reality is, right? The Democrats know Trump's base. It's evangelicals, it's white Catholics, it's people who attend church. It's a very conservative, religious, voting block. Every election shows this, right? So they want to get up there. They want a porn star giving a salacious testimony, even though she signed an affidavit saying that they never had any sex, but now she's giving testimony in front of a New York trial. They did the same thing with E. Jean Carroll. Right? E. Jean Carroll's on that job. They let her testify against Trump. They brought in all these different women to testify against Trump. None of these women had any case against Trump, but this other civil trial, same thing, because they want to paint Trump as this like sexual deviant and hopefully lose enough percentage of this religious vote that they're hurt him, and that's what it's all about. He's not going to jail. This is going to get overturned because the judge didn't even allow the FEC expert to testify. No good explanation was given why the FEC expert wasn't allowed to testify, considering the underlying charge relates to the FEC. So, Brian, how do you come to that? Why wasn't the FEC expert allowed to testify at a trial that's based on an FEC violation?
Lucky, just before you ask Brian that question and he answers it, and I am going to go to Brian to answer it. Lucky, quick question. Many people on the panel have explained what they believe may happen, what may be the charges, and so on and so forth. Let's say, hypothetically speaking, President Trump was given, let's say, 6 months jail sentence. If they were to appeal in the United States, how does it work? Does his then jail sentence be put on hold until after the appeal, or does it be that while he's in prison, there's an appeal?
Can I answer that? Yes.
Yeah, go ahead, Jamal.
So yes, that's how it goes. So essentially, what will happen is if there is some sort of a sentence, he would be moving forth an appeal and look to stay the sentence, which essentially will happen. Donald Trump will not be going to jail, especially this year. So we gotta make this clear. I know a lot of folks are saying all different things, but what will happen is even if there was a sentence, it'll stay past the presidential election in November. So the reality that we have here is that we got an election coming up in November. So how does this really affect the election? What will happen if Trump wins, right? What will happen if Trump does not win? These are the questions that we got to answer. Trump isn't going to jail. We can throw that out the window. What type of effect does this have on the election is the only question that we should be answering at this time. And in my view, I believe that this catapults Trump into the White House, really pushing folks who didn't even like Trump before to see what this case has done to Trump and even look to vote for him now. So I think this backfires for the Democrats in my view. I think that what you will see is, more folks that will lean towards Trump, especially while Joe Biden is having massive problems, right? Look at what's happening, in Ukraine and Russia and Palestine and Israel. The loss of voters just came out, 32% and the loss of young voters. There's a big percentage of black voters that he's lost. So if he doesn't do something to catapult his campaign over the next couple months, I think you see a Trump candidacy, winning here in November and pushing him forward. And then you can start to say, all right, how does that play effect on now these indictments and these cases that are pending?
I mean, he's still a convicted felon now. On January 20th, 2021,
Bruh.
we had the worst economy since the Great Depression.
Okay, let him finish. Let him finish, because if everyone streams while he's speaking, 1 second, I'm gonna let you go. Brian, 1 second, I'm gonna let you go. Just let him speak, guys, because it's just like we don't want. Just like no one likes it when he interrupts, which he does a lot. But at the same time, let him speak.
But you interrupt him. Nobody interrupted.
Massive unemployment. The GDP was plummeting. We had 3,000 people a day dying on 9/11. This was how Donald Trump left his. Stop acting like it was better when he left office.
Wait, 9/11
was not. 9/11. Maybe he had some concussions. On January 2020, it was a 9/11.
Brian, just a quick question.
It was a 9/11.
Whoa, 1 second. Let me ask you a question, Brian. Brian, did you say 9/11 happened under Trump? I missed your point there. Go ahead, Brian, unmute your mic.
Saying we had over 3,000, that's 9/11 level casualties a day coming from COVID when Trump left office, per day. That's what I'm saying. It's not that 9/11 happened under Trump. Worse, far worse, far more.
It increased under Biden. If you look at the numbers.
Until
yeah. Also, Trump allowed the states to
the vaccines
mandate.
Got rolled out by Biden, who wasn't holding them back. Jared Kushner, the distribution czar, who screwed that up, and he should never have been put in charge of anything in the government, let alone the Middle East peace process. Look how great that went. The point I'm making is that things were not better when Trump left office and Biden took over. And Biden improved almost every metric: the economy, unemployment, GDP, COVID deaths, you name it. And Trump is still be a convicted felon. So I want to hear,
Brian, can you answer the
34 felonies is going to help Trump and hurt Biden. Trump is a convicted felon. Trump's a convicted felon, not Joe Biden.
Okay. Listen, Brian, you keep saying that, right? Just answer Lucky's question, because I think it's actually a very good question. Specifically why, and I am actually interested in that question. I'm going to ask the same question to Good Logic. I'm sure he'll have a good expansive reason for it as well. What's the reason why he wasn't allowed to testify?
Well, I'm not sure how the process worked, because the defense could have called him as a witness, I think, if they wanted to. They did not. I don't know why.
Yes, they did. He wasn't allowed to testify.
I'm not sure how this worked. All I'm going to say is that I think for political sensitivities, the FEC and the Justice Department under Biden and under Trump didn't want to pursue this at the time. They should have. Just because they
has
showed
nothing to do with the case right now, Brian.
Mercan blocked it.
It's not a legitimate violation of the law, and it clearly was. And we have a jury of 12 people who found that it was a violation of the FEC law.
There's
convenience that wasn't pursued before. But I don't know deep down why that was made. You'll have to ask the people involved, and I'm not one of them.
Okay,
So, Good Logic, can I ask you the same question? What's your thoughts behind it? But actually, give me both sides. Give me the side from why it would be in the Democrats' interest, and then also maybe from an impartial perspective, what would have been the thought process if it wasn't biased?
the thought process on you're asking about precluding the expert testimony?
Yeah, of the FCC.
Okay, so I'll tell you this. I struggle when like listening to Brian. I get like shivers down my spine because I feel like I'm in a campaign war. It's like it's not dialogue. It's not what Spaces is for. I love engaging T-Row from the other side, but with Brian, I feel like there's no conversation. It's frustrating. It's frustrating as hell because I wish he could engage. But I'll answer your question as follows. Of all the terrible decisions and questionable issues with the way Merchan ran this trial. The one area which he seems to have the most shelter under law, as far as decision he made against Trump, was with respect to the expert testimony. Experts are, I mean, that's just, if you recognize as a litigator, that you cannot get a litigator, you cannot have an expert come in and testify about what the law is. That's not what you ever, I mean, Prodigal, you're laughing. I'm asking you, you think that if you disagree with me, I'd be happy to
No,
hear what you
I
say.
don't even think I pressed anything. That might be delayed.
Oh, okay, no. No, so what I'm saying is the
Prodigal's getting a bit old. Good logic. Don't hit
even an expert, you don't have an expert witness telling you what the law is. If anything, he could come in there and testify about situations which historically the law is prosecuted, or it's, or how it's treated, arguably. But explaining what the law is considered the exclusive domain of the judge. So that is, so of all the decisions he made, that one is the one I have the least problems with. There are others which create serious questions about appealable error, not simply about the fact that he just stayed on this case, but continually allowing the prosecutor to object in openings, in closings, in which witnesses he did not allow, who were like fact witnesses, in the way he controlled how much Costello could testify, in the way and what areas he could testify about, and allowing Stormy Daniels to get up there and basically start describing a sex scene which has nothing to do with whether or not he paid her. Under the auspices of this is to establish her credibility, and to the testimony from this thing should have been a directed verdict against conviction. This should have been a directed verdict from acquittal before Trump defense got up there. And the reason is because they never established the primary elements, the essential elements, the prima facie elements of the crimes that he was charged with. This you enter a directed verdict saying no reasonable jury could come to a conclusion that he's guilty, and accordingly I'm directed verdict. What are you confused?
Oh yeah,
about?
don't forget Cohen admitting stealing over 30,000 too. That was fun.
What was that? I didn't hear about it.
How they get 34 felony conviction counts then just now?
Oh, it's very simple. It's very simple. The same way you're screaming like a lunatic that he's guilty, because you don't have to listen to the facts in order to come to the conclusion. Why would you ever have a directed verdict by that logic, Brian? Brian, think to yourself. Why should you ever have a directed verdict? The reason there's an option. Forget about this case. In any case ever in history, why should you ever have a directed verdict? Just leave it to the jury. It's because sometimes, in the eyes of the law, there's not enough here. It's just not legally a crime. But there's a very grave concern, especially when you have a polarizing political figure, that even though the guy's not really guilty, that the jury just doesn't like him.
What's he not guilty of? He obviously paid off a porn star before an election, just before an election.
They don't even necessarily know what the felony was.
Alvin Bragg, and then he wouldn't be charged with anything.
I'll tell you what, Brian, if you want to have that conversation, and you can have it with me calmly, I'll try to engage you in a dialogue.
That's what I'm just telling you. Simply put, he doesn't wait 10 years after the affair to pay off the porn star after Access Hollywood tape drops just before the election. If it's not also about the election, and because it's also about the election, then that is why he had to declare this as part of the campaign, and he didn't.
Why did they wait to bring this, Brian? What are you talking? You talking about delays?
Brian,
they this was in the midst of a campaign season when nobody would touch it. Like, just stop.
So let's ask.
No, everybody would have touched it after Access Hollywood. He snuffed it out, and it was a campaign expense, and he violated the law.
Sorry, Brian, that was a delayed one. Let me go to Jamal. Go ahead, Jamal, and then I'll go to Brian.
So the question that we really need to ask Brian, okay? Because I want to answer a couple of your questions. One, let's answer this question. If this was not Donald J. Trump behind this case, would this case have been tried? All right, and I think anybody can agree that this case would not have been tried if it was anyone else. We can understand that this had, this was about politics here, right? And they wanted to move forth this case at a time it was most volatile to try to, sway an election. We all know this. This is a fact, right? Now, the other question that, you talked about, you asked, as you said, well, why would people elect someone who's now a felon or whatever the case, you said? Here's the reason. Number one is because the majority of American people don't believe in these systems that are going after Trump, right? They don't believe that these systems are fair and just. They have had their own interactions with these systems where they didn't believe that they were fair. So the whole notion that the Democrats thought, all right, if we make them a felon or if we indict them everywhere, then maybe people, would stop liking them. That's going to backfire. Okay, all that is has done is energize the base, made people who didn't like them, and you have to also understand that you have an unpopular president. Now, maybe this could have been different if we had a popular president, but you have a vastly unpopular president in every demographic and group of people in America. So you have Joe Biden, who's unpopular,
Howard Trump's
and you have
approval when
Donald
he
Trump.
left. Howard Trump's approval
Listen,
when he left.
let's look at the poll numbers now. Let's look at the numbers
Don't act like
today.
Trump is
Let's be
any better
serious.
popularity.
If this was
Barely
going to work, Trump would not be excelling in a lot of polls around the country. So we got to
He's not
understand
excelling. He has
what's
a
really
narrow lead in some polls. That's it.
okay.
Period.
A person who is under multiple indictments shouldn't be in a narrow lead against the president of the United States.
Well,
It
now
will
that he's
not
been
happen
convicted,
another
look for
time.
that to change.
So it's not going to change because they've also polled to say the majority of people who support Trump or don't give a damn about it.
Yeah, but they
So
polled
let's be
independents
serious.
and other Republicans who said they would change their mind if he was
Brian,
found guilty. There's been a bunch
listen,
of polls
let's
that
be
said
serious.
a
I'm
bunch of
coming
Nikki Haley
here.
voters are not going to support
I'm
him.
coming from.
Nikki Haley
Okay,
voters
I'm
are
trying to
not
be interested in
Trump
this.
voters.
1 second. Okay, let me go to Justin actually, because Justin, I know, because you're talking about people who are not. I remember previously speaking, Justin was vehemently against Trump. So I would like to hear that actually, Justin. They're arguing about people who are not MAGA, who are Republicans, who disagree with Trump on some issues. I mean, I know yours one was COVID. How do you see this? Is this going to impact your vote? Is it going to impact your decision, or is this some? I know you expected this as well. So, like, what kind of impact does this have, and where are you now with Trump?
Thanks, Julie. Yeah, look, I've committed to vote for Trump begrudgingly, and I wasn't going to pull a lot of water for him. But now, the Democrats keep forcing my hand. I'm almost ready to put a yard sign out in my yard on this whole thing, as I think someone else alluded to on here. I think when people look at the specifics of the case, you realize very quickly that there's only one reason why this was brought, and that's because his last name was Trump. No one's ever been sort of brought to this, and I've been in political veins now for almost 25 years. I've seen a lot of FEC violations, a lot of things that have come through other clients and people that I've known who have been caught by the FEC, and even in federal court. I had a good friend who was sentenced here in San Diego, and they didn't go to jail, and it was very rare for them to be brought, and usually it's just a slap on the hand, and usually these things are just dismissed. So this was obviously very politically motivated.
Records? Can I ask if they falsified business records? The friends that you're talking about, did they do that, and did they pay off a porn star?
Oh, no, absolutely. That's been my biggest gripe. The whole thing is that, look, in the end, this was because Trump doesn't have scruples and mores, and we have to each make our own decision on these things. But in the end, I'm like, look, it's hard for me to stomach exactly what transpired up there. I don't deny. In fact, I've been taking him to task on, look, none of this would happen. Donald Trump has a part of blame in this whole thing. Okay. Absolutely. You cannot deny that. But in the end, this was vastly politically motivated. Almost all sides agree to that. And the outcome is embarrassing. And I think it's just a debacle. I'm just embarrassed by this whole entire situation
Republicans tried
on
to
both sides.
impeach Clinton, right?
So just
Wouldn't they have
one
gone
second,
after
Brian.
Clinton if Clinton had paid a
Oh my
porn star
God.
and denied?
Brian,
Let's
you
talk
won. Why
about
do you sound so scared?
porn
Brian,
that
you
Bill
won,
Clinton.
Brian. Why
Second,
you
I'm
sound
asking
so
him questions.
scared?
Are you bringing up really Bill Clinton, who's actually paid off plenty of
No,
women?
I'm saying if Bill Clinton had done this, he would have been prosecuted.
He has
too.
done
The idea
this.
that-
He has
no,
done
he
this.
never violated.
Yes,
he never
he has.
falsified records for campaign donations.
What about the sock drawer?
Let's be
We had
serious.
classified documents.
Okay, Brian. The next time you interrupt, I'm just going to drop you. Like, I'm trying my best to keep you up because just to provide some other perspective. We've got other people coming in from the other side anyway, so you need to just calm yourself down.
I was just respecting
I'm asking him questions and you're just interrupting rudely. Like, I don't know if you've not learned manners before, but no
I
one's
mean, to be
debating you.
fair,
I'm literally asking him
monkeypox is
questions.
breaking out against him. I don't know. Maybe he's scared of it.
Oh, bro, if it's possible, like, listen, I'll take your word for it, Prodigal. Prodigal's normally on it. Right, Justin, let's go back to, I was asking you questions, so I'm actually interested because you're not, like, part of the MAGA base. I know at one point you didn't want to vote Trump. So are you going to be voting Trump now, or what's your
Yeah, I mean, in the end, I'm a dutiful Republican soldier. I'm even raising money for Trump. In fact, I can tell you just within the last hour, hundreds of thousands of dollars has been pouring in. The donation page is broke, and people just have a general sense as to what's fair and what's unfair. Look, I'm not a fan of the guy, but in the end, when I compare him to Joe Biden and what's happening in the country, there's just it's difficult for me to do that. Now, again, the difference is I was going to vote for Trump. I've committed to that for since the primaries because I'm a dutiful Republican soldier in this thing. But I wasn't going to bend over backwards to help him in any specific way, and I was still going to hold his feet to the fire on all things COVID, and I still will. But this makes me want to get out and do more. I'll just say that.
So okay, so this has made you move more towards Trump. That's interesting because this was the question really. Because I remember when DeSantis was basically with the Trump, and when he was basically going against Trump in the primary, your position then was like even if DeSantis wasn't going to win, you weren't going to vote Trump. So after that, you were going to vote Trump, and now you're saying actually with this conviction, with this